So how did you make your decisions in the trolley dilemma? Did you have a gut feeling? Did you have a rationale? Was there some sort of principle that you applied to it? Um, let's look now at a discussion of ethical theory, an introduction, so as to provide a framework, a foundation for the ethical analysis that we'll have going forward in this course. You're going to look at the reasonings of two classmates and then see if any of what we talk about right now in this discussion applies to their decision making or not. In a lot of ways, what I say right here will be sort of the most academic discussion of the semester. Simplify it. Make some bullet points, have working definitions of these expressions in order to, once again, apply it to all that is coming down the road. We're basically talking about two different kinds of ethical theory. The first is character-based ethical theory. That is the ethics of being. What makes a good person in your society, in your culture, in your era during which you live? What are the virtues that are most prized? Are they virtues like compassion or wisdom or honesty? This goes back to the Greeks, Aristotle and his predecessors. And then we have action-based ethical theory, which is fortunately just like it sounds. We're not talking about the ethics of being anymore. We're talking about the ethics of doing. What is the right thing to do versus what makes a good person? In action-based ethical theory, you have two expressions that are a little bit hard to pronounce, but they're doable. So deontological ethical theory, deon from the Greek, means duty. What is your obligation? What governs you? What principles govern you? Think about a commandment like thou shalt not kill. That's a principle. You apply that absolutely. You apply that universally. Well, unfortunately, absolutisms and universalities can be tricky. We also have teleological ethical theory, where we're starting to talk more about outcomes and consequences. And we'll see a little bit more of those when we talk about our resolution principles. We have three. They also are very closely linked to what they sound like. Ends-based thinking is the discussion of utility. Utility from the French utile, use, usefulness. Many of us have heard, have applied, have said ourselves, what's the greatest good for the greatest number? We're once again talking about consequences, and we're focusing on results, not so much intention. Rule-based thinking, Immanuel Kant was seen in a previous slide. Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher from the 1700s, had his categorical imperative. Some people call it his moral imperative. And he was, once again, an extremist. He said, do the same thing in no matter what the situation, if that is your principle. You can see right away why that is hard when you apply it to any sort of ethical theory or bioethical theory, because two people are not the same. Two circumstances are very rarely exactly the same. And then finally, we have care-based thinking. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you is a cornerstone of some of the world's great religions. Some of us Skyped about how religion would manifest itself in this course, and here's one way where the influence of something like the Golden Rule is really, really relevant. These are sort of more a historical perspective on ethics, and we'll finish now with a more modern one, and that is a very important concept of principlism. Principlism will be a huge element of this course. It's really prevalent in medical ethics, and we'll use this a lot in all of our ethical analysis. Look at the notions of autonomy. You know what autonomy means. Auto, self. Autonomy is a sense of self-direction. Many of us, especially adolescents, want as much autonomy as possible. Beneficence is the notion of doing good. Non-maleficence is the notion of not doing bad, or do no harm is oftentimes linked to Western medical practice. The notion of doing no harm is one of a doctor's first obligations. And then finally, justice. What is fair? Who should get that kidney? How do you apply fairness or justice to something like organ allocation? And in order for you to decide what is best in a situation like an organ allocation, you need to take into consideration each of these four principles. This was a lot. Do what I said earlier. Get a working definition for each of these. Use them as a framework. Imagine a dilemma and see how some of these will apply. Go back now to the trolley dilemma. Look at two people with whom you've been paired. Look at what they decided in the trolley dilemma and see if any of this fits. See if any of their decision making seem to be governed by some of these ideas.